How are you guys doing? Today is Saturday, February 5th, 2022. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite profile for Neymar, the elite Brazilian forward for PSG, turns 30 today, and my intention with this episode is, of course, to point out Neymar's impact on the entire game of soccer, a worldwide game, of course, at a micro level, seeing what he does game in, game out at a consistent level to keep his team playing at a very competitive level year in and year out. And of course, I'm going to zoom out and look at what his impact has been on a very macro level for every single one of the teams that he's played for, as this is a player who's risen up to be South America's best young player and has represented Brazil time in and time out. And at this point, he is virtually on his way towards being Brazil's all-time leading goal scorer of all time, trailing the only person who stands above him in the Brazil pantheon of soccer, who is Pelé. So just to give you a sense of who this player is right before we get into the profile, Neymar stands at about 5'9". He's a very slim player. I guess the name of his game is literally speed and control. He's one of the best he's one of the best dribblers of the soccer ball that we've really seen in this game. He has his own skill. He has his own flair that he brings to the game. And the fact that he does show it off, and he is incredibly cocky, and he does happen to get fouled a lot because his feet do move faster than the defenders. And I mean, he has kind of turned into a meme at this point, but people do forget that Neymar, for most of his life, up until he played with Messi, was the best player on every single one of his soccer teams that he's played on. So I digress. I'm going to get into what makes Neymar one of the world's best. He was originally from Mogi de Cruzes in Brazil. He would find himself coming up through the youth system within Brazil. And if you're familiar with how the Brazilian youth system works, most Brazilian prospects have come up in the Brazilian league and then made their ways over to Europe. In Neymar's case, he would come up and play for Santos, which was one of Brazil's most highly prized teams. And he would go on and be called up to Santos as a 17-year-old, and he would eventually leave as a 21-year-old. In his 4 years in Santos, he, of course, would rise up to being one of the world's best soccer players. He would be finished third for the 2010 award for South American Footballer of the Year. This is when he was only 18 years old. In 2011, he would go on to win the Puskás, which is the award given to the world's best goal scorer for the year. And at the conclusion of the 2011 year, he was named the South American Footballer of the Year, winning by a record margin, and he would go on to win it as a teenager in 2011, and then going into 2012, he would go on to score his 100th goal for Santos, and he was, of course, already a member of the Brazilian national team by 2010. On his way towards being named South America's best player for the second year in a row in 2012, he would go on to represent Brazil at the 2012 Olympics in London, where Brazil would go all the way to the final and lose to Mexico. In the 6 Olympic Games he played as a team player that was about to turn 20, he would go on to finish with 3 goals and 4 assists. He even added a penalty kick. After that 2012 Olympics appearance that saw him win the silver medal, he would, of course, go on to win the South American Footballer of the Year for the 2012 season, as he was yet another finalist for the Puskás Award. In his final season in 2013, following his Brazilian in the Olympics debut, he would go on to play yet another great season for Santos. And in May of 2013, Neymar would officially make the transfer to Barcelona after he had already been seen playing in European competition, as he had won a championship with Santos or he had won the Paulista, so he had competed with them in the FIFA Club World Cup, where they finished runners up to Bayern Munich. But since everyone had really got a chance of Neymar, Barcelona definitely want to get a chance and see if Neymar was most definitely worth putting in their first team. And once they put him in the first team, he fit virtually seamlessly into that Barcelona attack. His very first season in Europe would be his age 21 season in 2013-14. In his age 21 season, he would start 19 of the 26 matchups he played for a Barcelona team that would eventually go on and finished second in La Liga for the season. Specifically within La Liga play, he would finish with 9 goals and 8 assists in 26 games. As a 21-year-old, very tough to do just on its head like that. Not to mention that he would go on to finish with a goal in a Copa del Rey run, where Barcelona would get all the way to the final and end up losing in that final 2-1 to Real Madrid. They would go all the way to the quarterfinals of Champions League in 2013-14, was eventually the season where Real Madrid would end up beating Atletico Madrid in the final. And not to mention that in those Champions League games, Neymar would finish with 4 goals and 3 assists in the 10 matches he played. He even added a goal in the 2 matches he played in a Supercopa run that would see Barcelona take home the only trophy that they would win that year. They ended up beating Atletico Madrid on away goals, as Barcelona's their lone goal in the first leg came from Neymar, and that eventually ended up winning Neymar his very first title in Spain. So of course that was his very first year, and of course first years are really hard to get adjusted to, but of course Neymar proved that he was a vital part to this dominating team that is Barcelona. Following his very first season with the team, he would go and compete with Brazil in the World Cup, and going into 2014, this would be the first big international world tournament that he would compete in. I mean, he competed in the 2011 Copa Americas, but they didn't get past the quarterfinals. In 2014, however, in this World Cup that they would play in Brazil, they would go on to beat Croatia in the first matchup 3-1, as 2 of their goals came from Neymar. Their second matchup would end up in a draw versus Mexico. Their third group stage matchup would see them beat Cameroon, as 2 more goals came from Neymar. He had 4 goals in group stage. Once they made it out, they would face Chile in the round of 16. They would end up drawing with Chile, but they would advance. They would end up beating Colombia 2-1 in the quarterfinals before losing 7-1 to Germany in the semifinals. They ended up losing 3-0 to Netherlands in the third place playoff, as they didn't place. And this was when Brazil was hosting it all. But of course, Neymar would add his 4 goals for the World Cup that year. Not to mention that he also added an assist in the 5 matchups that he played. Following his very first World Cup appearance, Neymar would return for his second full season with Barcelona. In his age 22 season, he would start 29 of the 33 La Liga games he played, in a season where Barcelona would finish as the champions of La Liga for the very first time since he had been there in that year. He would finish with 22 goals and 7 assists, the very first time he would finish with at least 20 goals in a domestic season in itself. Not to mention that he would play 6 games in a Copa del Rey stint that would see Barcelona go all the way to the final and beat Athletic Bilbao 3-1, as their second of their 3 goals would come from Neymar. So, of course, he would add a goal to help them win yet another trophy, and that would be their double for that year. Not to mention this was the year where they got Luis Suarez. And they would also go all the way to the Champions League final, where they would go all the way to the final, and they would go on, and in that final round, they would beat Juventus 3-1. As in that final matchup, their last goal in the 97th minute would come from Neymar as a cherry on top goal to give Barcelona their first Champions League win since 2011, and this would be the very first time that Neymar would win the Champions League and, of course, the treble. This is the only time in Neymar's career that he has won the Champions League. And this is the last time that Barcelona has won the Champions League as the champions of Europe following that season. In the 12 Champions League matches he played, Neymar was able to add 10 goals. This would be the only time in his career, I believe, to date that he was able to score a double-digit amount of Champions League goals. So this would also be the most games that he would play in a run all the way there, as he played all 12 games. Following this 2014-15 season, Barcelona would, of course, come back and go on to win the UEFA Super Cup going into the next year. They beat Sevilla, who was already from Spain. They beat them 5-4 in that matchup. They would also go on to win the FIFA Club World Cup as they beat River Plate from Argentina all the way in the final, as 2 of their goals in that one came from Suarez. But in Neymar's third season with the Barcelona Football Club in his age 23 season, would of course follow his second stint at the Copa America, which would take place in Chile. In 2015, Brazil would make it all the way to the quarterfinals before they ended up losing to Paraguay in penalties, just to get a sense of how they lost there. But in 2015-16, Neymar's third year with Barcelona, his age 23 season, he would start all 34 of the La Liga matchups he played in a season where Barcelona would repeat and win La Liga for the second year in a row in his third season there. In the 34 matchups he played, which was the most La Liga games he's played in a season, he finished with 24 goals and 12 assists. His 36 combined scoring plays are the most scoring plays he would ever put together in a domestic season in his age 23 season at Barcelona. He would also go on to add 4 goals and 2 assists as he played 5 games in a Copa del Rey run that saw Barcelona beat Sevilla in the final. Neymar would score their second goal in extra time in the 122nd minute to give Barcelona yet another trophy to add on to the hundreds of trophies that Barcelona already had going in. And then this year, they would go all the way to the Champions League quarterfinal, as this year in the quarterfinal, they would find themselves losing to Atletico Madrid, who went all the way to the final to lose to Real Madrid this year. But that was just to give you a sense of how formidable this 2015-16 side was. And following this season, which would be his best season at Barcelona, he would go on to compete with Brazil at the Olympics yet again, and this time he would compete in the Rio Olympics in front of his home fans after Brazil had failed to win the World Cup. In the Olympics this year, he would finish with 4 goals and 3 assists as he played 6 matchups, as Brazil would go all the way to the final, and then Neymar would end up making the penalty kick in the Olympics that ended up giving Brazil the gold medal and ended up winning the title for them, as they ended up beating Germany in the final in 2016. And then following Neymar's lone win, where he was able to take home he was able to take home the gold medal for Brazil. Brazil also competed in the Copa America in 2016, and in the 100th anniversary of this tournament, Brazil would end up getting knocked out of group stage after they ended up not even making it past Peru and Ecuador. But of course, Neymar was competing at the Olympics, and following Neymar's Olympic win, he of course would return to Barcelona for his 4th and final season in La Liga. In his age 24 season, he would start all 30 of the games that he would play in a season where Barcelona would finish runners-up in La Liga for the second time since he had been there. And taking a look at how they fared within those 30 games, Neymar was able to finish with 30 goals and 10 assists, making it the second consecutive year he was able to have double-digit goals and assists in a domestic season. And his 13 goals are the least he's ever put together in a season where he's played at least 30 games. Not to mention that outside of La Liga, he would play 6 Copa del Rey games, adding 3 goals and 2 assists, as Barcelona would go on to win the Copa del Rey for the 3rd year in a row with Messi, Suarez, and Neymar in their attack. As Neymar would help Barcelona defeat Alaves in the final, he would score the second of the team's 3 goals that they all scored in the first half. That and the Supercopa would be the 2 titles they won this year. This would go on to be the second time that Neymar was able to help the team win the Supercopa de España. They would end up beating Sevilla in 2 legs, as they would win this matchup 5-0 on aggregates. In the Champions League in 2016-17, they would end up losing in the quarterfinals this year. Barcelona ended up losing to Juventus, who went all the way to the final, all the way to lose to Real Madrid in the final, just to get a sense of how that season ended. Following the 2016-17 season, Neymar would, of course, be the most expensive transfer in soccer history when he was moved. With a payment of 222 million euros, he was moved to Paris Saint-Germain, and as of right now, he has still been a member of the team, as his contract went until 2022, where he was, of course, given the number 10 after he was number 11 at Barcelona. And Neymar's very first season with Paris Saint-Germain would be his age 25 season in 2017-18. In that season, he would start all 20 of the Ligue 1 games he played in a season where PSG would go on to win Ligue 1. This would come after they had finished runners-up, and after they had ended their 4-year streak of winning Ligue 1, but of course they would win in Neymar's very first year. In that season, in the 20 games he played, he finished with 19 goals and 13 assists, with 32 scoring plays in the 20 games he played. Because in 2017-2018, he was dealing with a little bit of injury, as he was dealing with a bone in his right foot. Not to mention that outside of Ligue 1, in the Coupe de France, he would go on to play 1 game where PSG would, of course, go on to win the Coupe de France. They would go in this tournament. PSG would finish by beating Les Arbiers 2-0 in that final matchup. That would be yet another trophy for PSG and his first time winning this tournament with PSG. They would go on to win the Coupe de la Ligue. In the final, they would go on to beat Monaco, as Cavani scored 2 of those 3 goals. And they will go on to win the Trophée des Champions, which is the French Super Cup, as they would go on to beat Monaco this particular season. They would go on to win 4 trophies in France, and in Champions League, they would make it all the way to the round of 16. As in the round of 16, they would find themselves getting knocked out. This year, the team that would knock them out would be Real Madrid, who went all the way to the final to beat Liverpool. So that would really kind of wrap up his very first year with PSG. And then following that year, he would go on to compete with Brazil again at the 2018 World Cup. And in the 2018 World Cup, Brazil would make it out of the group stage, as Neymar scored in their second group stage matchup against Costa Rica. Once they made it to the round of 16, they ended up beating Mexico 2-0, as Neymar scored their first goal there. And they would end up losing in the quarterfinals to Belgium, and that would be the one that knocked them out. This was, of course, the World Cup that took place in Russia. And that was the last time that Neymar had competed in a World Cup outing, his last matchup being against Belgium in the 2018 quarterfinals. But following that year, Neymar, of course, would return for his second full season at PSG, his age 26 season in 2018-19. He would go on to start 16 of the 17 Ligue 1 matchups he played. And in those 17 matchups he played, he would go on to help PSG win the Ligue 1 title for the second year in a row. 2018-19 was a particularly tough year for the French champs, as with Neymar playing half the year. He still went on to finish with 15 goals and 7 assists. That's 22 scoring plays in 17 matchups. But with Neymar dealing with a lot of injury in this year as well, he would go on to, or I guess PSG as a team would finish as runners-up in the Coupe de France, as they ended up losing in the final matchup to Rennes, as Neymar would score PSG's second goal in regulation. He even scored their fifth goal in penalty shootout, but it would be the next kicker who would end up missing the penalty, which would knock PSG out of the tournament. In the Coupe de la Ligue, they would end up losing in the quarterfinal as they couldn't make it through. They ended up losing to Guingamp. But they were, however, able to win the French Super Cup that year as they beat Monaco in the Trophée des Champions to win them their second trophy of the year. That would go on to be yet another season, another great season for Neymar. But of course, following his age 26 season, he would compete with Brazil in the Copa America for 2019. In 2019, Brazil would go all the way to the final where they would go on and win their matchup. As Brazil would, of course, win their group. They were able to win their group stage as Neymar did not score a single goal in group stage. However, once they made it to the quarterfinals, they would end up drawing past Paraguay to make it to the semis. They would end up beating Argentina 2-0 in this matchup, but then they would end up beating Peru in the final, as Neymar was not able to play with the team over the summer as he was dealing with his injury. But of course, in 2019, that would be the most recent year that Brazil has won the at least they had won the Copa America. But following that summer, Neymar would, of course, return for his third full season with the PSG soccer club. In his age 27 season, he will go on to start all 15 of the games he played, where PSG would go on to repeat as the champions of PSG for the third year in a row, and his third year being there. As of course, this would be the season where, of course, he and Kylian Mbappe would really come into their own. In 2019-2020, they, like I said, they would go on to win La Ligue or Ligue 1. And in the 15 games he played, he finished with 13 goals and 6 assists, with 19 total scoring plays in those 15 games for a PSG team that was, of course, chugging along and dominating. Not to mention that he would go on to add a goal and an assist and a Coupe de la Ligue and a Coupe de la Ligue run that would see PSG make it all the way to the final and then beat Lyon on penalties. Neymar, of course, would make his penalty. The PSG team would go on to win the Coupe de France in 2019-2020. This year, they would beat Saint-Etienne in the final, as their lone goal would come in the 14th minute from Neymar, as he would go on to finish with 2 goals in the 2 matchups he played. And then not to mention that he would go on to, within this season itself, Neymar would also add to help PSG win the Trophée des Champions, as PSG was able to beat Rennes 2-1 to win them their quadruple within France. And also this year they would make it all the way to the Champions League final, the very first time that PSG had made it all the way to the final. And once they had made it to the final in 2019-20, they would end up losing 1-0 to Bayern Munich, as this would have been PSG's chance to win every single trophy, as Neymar was one of the big reasons that PSG had gotten that far. In the 7 Champions League matchups he played, he finished with 3 goals and 4 assists. This, of course, following this year, would transition into a summer that was, of course, impacted by COVID. They even had to move back what was scheduled for 2020 into 2021. But this would transition into Neymar's age 28 season with the club. In his 4th season with PSG, he would start 15 of the 18 Ligue 1 games he played in a season where PSG would finish runners-up. And this was the most recent season that they had finished, as this year the winner was Lille. And PSG still was able to win a couple of trophies this year. But first, in the Liga, in the 18 matchups he played, Neymar was able to add 9 goals and 5 assists. His 14 goals in 18 matches played. This would be the first time since his last season in Barcelona in which he had less scoring plays combined between goals and assists than matches played, just to give you a sense of what his impact had been every single year with this PSG team. And in 2020, 2021, not to mention Neymar was able to play 3 games in a Coupe de France run that would see PSG go all the way to the final, where in the final they would go on to beat Monaco 2-0. Not to mention that PSG would also win the Trophée des Champions in 2020 as they beat Marseille 2-1. Their second goal would be a penalty kick from Neymar before Marseille scored their lone goal of the game. That would be 2 trophies for PSG. Not to mention that they would beat Bayern Munich in the Champions League this year, but they would end up losing in the semifinal to Manchester City, who went all the way to the 2021 final to end up losing to Chelsea for the season. But that is exactly how that season would finish. Not to mention that Neymar would go and compete with Brazil for the 2021 Copa America, where they would eventually go on and finish as runners-up to Argentina. They lost 1-0 in the final. In group stage, Neymar was able to help Brazil score in their 3-0 win versus Venezuela. He helped them score. He scored one of their 4 goals in their second group stage matchup versus Peru. In their third matchup, they would end up beating Colombia 2-1, and they ended up drawing with Ecuador 1-1 to make it to knockout stages. In the quarterfinals, Brazil would beat Chile 1-0 to advance to the semifinals. Another goal from Paqueta in the semifinals would advance Brazil to the final, where they would end up losing on a Angel Di Maria goal, which would give Argentina its first Copa win in a very long time, and of course the first time since Messi had been on the team. But that was this most recent summer, and this would be the last time that Brazil competed in an international tournament like this. And following this 2021 summer, this of course had led into Neymar's 5th season with PSG, going into his age 29 season, where now he's turning 30. So far, he's started all 10 of the games he's played for a PSG team that at the moment is currently sitting comfortably on top of the Liga. They sit 10 games ahead of second place Marseille with 1 less game being played. In the 10 matchups he played in Liga, Neymar has 3 goals and 3 assists with 6 scoring plays in about 10 matchups so far. He has not scored or assisted in any of the 4 Champions League games he's played, but of course he's one of the big part of the reasons that PSG is still competing within this Champions League matchup within this table. As PSG finished second, of course, in their table to Man City. Their next matchup is going to be against Real Madrid on February 15th, as that's going to be his next Champions League matchup. But that's currently where we sit, as we are in the middle of a season where PSG could very possibly win multiple trophies yet again. And PSG is most definitely a threat to the Champions League title now that they definitely have Lionel Messi back on their team. With that said, I want to thank the Pro Football or the Pro Soccer reference websites, Footy Stats, the FIFA websites that I'm using for all the facts and figures that I needed. And of course, I want to thank everyone for listening to all 29 minutes of this piece. I do hope all is well. If you get a chance to watch Neymar, definitely would recommend doing so. He wears number 10 for Paris Saint-Germain, and he also wears number 10 for the Brazilian soccer team. And sometime between this year and the next year, he's going to pass Pelé in international goals scored for Brazil. And once he does, he will, of course, be cemented as one of the greatest Brazilian soccer players to ever play, if he hasn't already done so. Neymar is a very impactful player. He even most recently dropped a Netflix documentary talking about like how he's impacted by the fact that he's done all this for his country and people still peg him as a villain. I do think that a lot of the Neymar hate is unwarranted, but I do think that Neymar has proven that he is most definitely the cream of the crop as it comes to this world's best soccer players, and I can't wait to see what he does between now and next year. And until then, I want to thank everyone for listening to this piece. I do hope all is well. Once all of today's exhibitions and matchups are done, I'm going to come back tomorrow on Sunday, February 6th for another episode of The Elite. So until then, thanks for listening. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with another episode after this. Peace out.